welcome to today's episode of the Dive Into Reiki podcast. And I'm very excited. I have a very interesting person today that says thank you, that said yes. And I'm very grateful, Robert Fueston. And we're going to be talking a lot about some part of Reiki history I had no idea before I read his book. So, based in Kentucky, Robert Fueston is a state licensed and nationally board certified acupuncturist and Chinese herbalist. He's a Reiki master and teacher, author, and internationally recognized researcher and teacher of Reiki. He started his training in Usui Shiki Reiki Ryoho in 1996, and his desire to understand the movement of Reiki from Japan to the West set him on a path of researching Hawayo Takata and her role in bringing Reiki from Japan to the US. With a Master of Library and Information Service and a Postmaster's Certificate of Advanced Graduate Study in Library and Information Science, he spent decades studying with and researching the Takata Masters in order to understand the preservation and, at times, alterations of the Reiki system. The results were published in an eye-opening book I just finished a couple of months ago called Reiki Transmission of Light. Additionally, Robert participated as a team member in the organization of the Historical Archives of the Reiki Alliance and as a member of the Hawayo Takata Archive Team. And even though all of these sounds very serious, Robert actually has a great sense of humor, a great smile, and it seems in acupuncture he likes to make people laugh when he puts his little needles in. So I'm really looking forward to our chat today. Thank you so much, Robert, for saying yes.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. And I start every podcast in the same way. How did you come in contact with Reiki the first time?
The first time was, in fact, I took a class before I ever had a treatment. So I got a book from a book club, and it was a free book. So I decided, I'll just pick this one. I knew nothing about Reiki. And I got that book, and I didn't read it, for like a good year. And I finally read the introduction, and then it said what it was about, but it said you had to be initiated by a Reiki master. And I knew there was no Reiki masters where I lived. So I thought, well, that's nice, but that's not going to happen for me. And just within that week, I kid you not, like there was a bulletin board, with the old cork board. People would put like letters and business cards on it. And it said, Reiki class now available. It was at this tea shop I would visit. And so I could not believe it. And I called the number because I was like, wow, I just read about this. And this guy was visiting from Maui. And he said he would train me if I could bring 5 students to the class. So I convinced my friends to take this class. And not really knowing much about it myself, not into anything like this at all, but it just seemed like I was being led that way, having just read that introduction to the book. Just happens that this guy appears, and I'm like, this is an opportunity and I'll take it. So that's what I did. And I've been practicing ever since. And that was in 1996.
Wow, that's actually 10 years exactly before I started in a very weird way, and also without having a Reiki session before.
Right.
Thank you. So you did, and again, probably like around 90% of people who take Reiki 1 don't really move forward or they keep the practice to themselves.
Right.
What drove you to deepen and go into Reiki Masters and keep on training?
That's a good question. I practiced for 6 months, first degree, and it just never occurred to me. It never even occurred to me that there was a second degree. I just didn't really think about it. And finally, after about, month 5 or so, I started thinking, I'm practicing this stuff. And I kind of remember, so I looked in the book, and sure enough, there was more stuff. It was about second degree. So I was like, oh, okay, so there's more. And it sounds interesting where you can do remote treatments and different kind of things. And so my teacher was gone. He was back in Maui. So I didn't know where to find a teacher. And I was at this metaphysical store. I was actually on the sidewalk outside the metaphysical store, and there was just a sheet of paper taped to the glass window. display case window, and sure enough, it said Reiki class, or Reiki available, Reiki classes available. So I was like, wow. So I called that guy, and that guy said, well, I'm a new teacher, so I'm only teaching first degree, so I'll send you to my teacher. So I was like, wow, that's really good. So me and one of my other friends who took first degree with me 6 months prior, we went and got trained in second degree. And at that time, well, at that time, back in the day, you had to bring your first degree certificate because, this teacher didn't know me. So I had to bring my first degree certificate to her so she would know I really was trained, first degree. So did that, and she trained us both in second degree. And I didn't really have any plans on going to the teaching level. But life throws you curveballs. I thought I was going to stay up in northern Ohio or move up to Michigan, and that didn't happen. So I instead decided I was going to move to South Carolina. And I'm thinking South Carolina, I've lived my whole life in Ohio. I don't think there's going to be any Reiki teachers down there. And so I was discussing this with my second degree teacher, and she's like, well, I'll train you before you go. And I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome, And it wasn't like too long after my second degree. And the only reason we did it, and it was just like maybe, I'm guessing 3 or 4 months. As a guess, I'd have to look. And it was simply because I was going to move away. And so, but her and I kept in contact for years. I mean, through email, and whenever I come to Ohio, we'd visit, we'd have Reiki share still. I spent a lot of time with her actually. So that's how, and as soon as I got to South Carolina, of course, then I wanted to find more Reiki people, but at first I was like, oh, there's nobody here. But then I found people. So then I was hanging out with them, and we were practicing together, Reiki shares. So it just was like, it was just like a continuous thing when I started practicing in 96. It just kept going.
It's beautiful. No, I'm thinking also like in the late 90s, there were not even that many people like practicing
No.
Reiki. So to find them, yeah, when you found them, you were like, stay with
Yeah,
me. Even
yeah,
if,
yeah. Because
yeah,
I mean, I think there was no, there's not hardly any web pages. I mean, the internet's not what it is today. I mean, I think Google came out around 96, if I'm not mistaken. And there wasn't many web pages, so there was nothing really to have to show. And so it wasn't like you could connect with people online very well.
yeah, no, it's as you say, it was going to a store or like a yoga studio or something like that.
Yeah,
There was a beauty of synchronicity in it. It still
yeah.
happened with Google, but it's easier. It's less of a good story. Like my story is literally a Google Reiki, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, yeah. It's a different world.
So there is obviously, and you're trained as a researcher, so that makes sense. But like a lot of us, when I took my first training, there were things that felt like a little bit like didn't fit with me. But I said, well, that's the training, that's it. Yet you were like, hold on, I want to know how Mrs. Takata actually
Yeah,
practiced, right?
yeah.
And so what awoke that? The research in you, what was that spark?
Yeah, the spark was, when I was meeting the people in South Carolina, and we started to discuss, what we had learned, and it was very clear we all learned different things. And so I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. Like, there really wasn't many books. I think maybe there's like 3 or 4 books of Reiki back then. There really wasn't many. So it was very confusing. So I'm like, well, there's only one way to really solve this mystery, and that's to go back in my lineage and go back and try to find my teacher's teacher and all the way back. And that was proving difficult. So I thought, well, Mrs. Takata, has passed, but she trained masters. And if I find them, I can find out what she was teaching at that time. So that's what I did. So it took a while, but once I found one, and I can't remember, it might have been Fran Brown, might have been the first one I found. Like, but she put me in contact with a bunch of the other ones, even the ones that weren't teaching, like George Araki and stuff. So it was just one of those things where it's like you had to really put effort into finding them. And then once you found them, it's a cold call, or you can get an email. something like that.
Starting to, even was literally just starting. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And I was, pretty new. I mean, this was 97. I was reaching out, and I think I made contact with Fran in 98. I'm not sure, but it took a while. But once that happened, the ball started rolling. And then, I mean, back then, the it was just different because it wasn't like, I mean, you'd have to travel. So I had to travel, to meet some of these people and train with them. Fran was on the West Coast in California, and John Harvey Gray, another Takata master, was on the East Coast, in Massachusetts. So it was like literally coast to coast. So it was not as easy. And I'd heard. I mean, I spoke with Phyllis on the phone. I spoke with Shinobu Saito. I spoke with Harry Kaboy. I spoke with all these Takata masters. But I was like, well, I couldn't fathom. Once I took John's classes, John Harvey Gray's classes, he had taught like Takata did, except he had added some chakra stuff in there. And so I was like, well, I really want strict Takata stuff. And I asked John on the break, I said, did Takata teach us? He's like, but everything else, was really strictly Takata based when I trained with him.
yeah.
And that was in 2000. So I took first and second degree, retook it with him. And then I went to Fran Brown eventually, but through all these other people, learning. So, but lots of Takata masters, I was lucky because, I contacted probably at least half. And then out of the ones I couldn't get a hold of, like sometimes their daughter, if they had passed already, sometimes like their daughter or their family had like their teaching materials, and I literally got, like their notes and things like that, so I could like compare all sorts of Takata master students information, and see what they learned from Mrs. Takata. And then eventually, a long time later, I was invited to be part of the Hawayo Takata Sensei Archive. So it was a group of five of us, and we went down to where Phyllis was living at the time, and went through all the Takata's material. And there's all sorts of awesome stuff in there, just really amazing. And of course, along the way, I picked up audio record Takata teaching first degree classes and second degree classes, and a bunch of stuff on the third degree she taught. It was just like being able to have a um, comprehensive knowledge of what Takata was teaching and when. It really was just fascinating to me, and that's really what I wanted, just for myself personally. But that's just kind of my path, was the Takata way. Yeah.
There are a couple of things I love. First, like without you and the team of the archive, those notes may have been lost. So they're really now 20 years after we realize how precious that work was. And the other thing I like is like, again, nowadays I got what I believe was Takata's histories of Reiki. And when I read your book of what Takata was actually teaching, it had nothing to do with what I learned. And
Right.
it was a lot closer to the traditional Japanese teachings.
Yeah,
Like,
that's right.
so we are passing as Takata's Western, but it's not. She was actually a lot closer.
Right.
Just made a couple of tweaks for the US to understand it. She didn't.
Yeah.
And what I got was very, very, very removed. I said, yeah, she did that because the US. No, that wasn't her. So for me, reading your book and reading, I'm like, oh, but this history, like I can see the tweaks, but it's actually very close to what I read on the tombstone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And that's what was really surprising to me. Because my first lineage was like, I had a whole bunch of people between me and Takata in the lineage sheet. And at some point things got changed because what I received, was not, really close. But I was in the Takata lineage, right? So
Yeah, me
it's
too.
like it was confusing. So once I started learning what Takata really taught, I was blown away, and I was like, wow, this stuff's really amazing and it's effective. And I wanted to find out what she was teaching and what she practiced, because her students had written books and things like that, and I mean, it wasn't like Takata tooting her own horn. Like these students had experiences of getting healed by treatments with Mrs. Takata. Takata had a system that was effective and simple, and it's like, wow, I want to learn that. And so if you practice that way, you see the results, and that's what people have to understand, that Takata, when she would treat people, she would treat them once a day. If it's a serious case, she would treat them twice a day, yet daily, for a month or 2 months or 3 months. It's not just like one treatment a week or one treatment every other. It's that consistency. So if you want to see the results that Takata, saw, you have to practice with diligence and with the frequency. All of that. It's all important.
Which is in the precept skill or hageme, right? It is
Yeah.
part there as well. Practice diligently or work hard or whatever we want to
Yeah.
translate it.
Right.
So it's no, and I think you said something beautiful, like simple and consistent, right?
Yeah.
And now sometimes we expect the same result from like, oh, I can help this person with the health. I'm just giving them like 45 minutes once a week or a week. We're never gonna have the same. And it's not about us. It's just literally like everybody needs that repetition, that many.
How it works. And that's how it works. And the more you practice, you know, the quicker, I would say, and it's true, the quicker the results would come, because more energy is able to flow through the practitioner at one time. So Takata, had remarkable success. And a lot of people, have had that experience where you do one treatment on somebody and something miraculous happens. And it's like, wow, but we always go in with the treatment just thinking, hey, we don't have any expectations. We don't know what's going to happen, because it's not really up to us. All we do is we put our hands on the person, let the energy flow, let the Reiki flow through. That person's body is pulling it through us based upon how much they need in that particular area that we have our hands on. And then when we don't feel that pull anymore, we move. We move our hand position to the next position. And then there comes that pull. And it's like, so when to change, because you can tell when that pull stops, and then you just move to the next position. So yeah, it's so simple. It's so simple. So it's a very easy practice to learn, and it's effective.
I think for us, at least in our culture, like the simplicity is the challenge, right? Because we
Oh
don't
yeah, yeah,
that you can actually go deeper into true repetition. Also, I hated repetition before I did martial arts. I'm like, what do you mean I'm repeating the same thing? Because I wasn't aware of the subtleties. I think, and you as well, like you train and repeat, and your protocol is even simpler than mine. So through repetition, I guess you can have these very sensitive subtleties of what happened.
right. Yeah, the more you practice, the more sensitive you become. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really that simple.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. And Takata, I'm trying to think how she phrased it. She phrased it like when you're first initiated into first degree, you might have like 20% of the energy coming out of your hands, because most of it, she talked about the Reiki channel. So it comes through the top of the head and it goes all the way down to your a little below your navel, and then it comes back up and out your arms and out your hands. So, but in the beginning, that lower tendon, that lower area below the navel, it's not as well developed. So most of the energy coming in is going to stick there. It's going to fill you up, and then you'll get the 20% excess will come out of your arms and your hands. But the more you practice, the more you practice, your ton is more developed. So more energy comes out of your hands. And so she said, by the time you do 40 years, like she was doing, she's like, you'll have just as much as me. But, she practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. And so it was remarkable. Consistency.
I'm also thinking no shortcuts, right? Like
No, that's right. No shortcuts. People love
no,
shortcuts. It's
no
like,
special symbol, no special attunement, no shortcut. Those only work for a little bit. They boost you and then you're back to where you were.
yeah, yeah, I mean, it's a practice. And so we, practice the practice, and we allow that practice to change us. And we don't change the practice, like, because that's the difference. It's like, do the practice and let it change you. And don't change the practice to suit where you already are, because you want some shortcut, or you think, oh, I know better. Well, first do the practice and see if it works. And if you have something that works, go with that. Um, and if you don't, reevaluate. But, if you have something that works, stick with it.
I love the way you just phrased that. Like, don't adapt the practice to where you are, allow it to take you further. I think that is the first time I hear it like that, and it really
Yeah.
resonates with me. So another part that I really love from your book, because obviously when I realized what I read from Mrs. Takata was like literally like, also I got a history that was like 4 lines long, right? Like, and then I read your book, and I had this, I realized Mrs. Takata again thought very differently from what I thought. And then the other thing I didn't know was the succession issue. And
All
it's
right.
quite interesting because we don't talk. And for those of you who are not as familiar, when you refer to Phyllis, is Phyllis Lei Furumoto, which is Takata's granddaughter. And she was one of those, is 22, now I may see me, maybe
Right.
3 masters that she trained. And there was another person who may have been also a successor. So there was like a little bit of a succession, um, Game of Thrones kind of action happening in 1980 when she passed.
Like putting the Game of Thrones.
I be like the Reiki, Game of Reiki, whatever you like. So
Yeah.
you can explain, because for me that is also explanation also of why also changes are happening a lot more, and also like why we have 150 lineages versus perhaps less,
Right.
or styles.
Yeah, and this is true of a lot of systems out there, whether it's Reiki or yoga or whatever. The teacher or the head teacher dies, they go into transition, and then there's squabbling. And it's like, really? I mean, we're supposed to be following the Reiki precepts. And I mean, legitimately, there probably was some confusion. And Phyllis did state, to me and a group of people that originally Barbara Weber was trained. I mean, she was trained to be Takata's successor. Um, but apparently they had a falling out very shortly before Mrs. Takata transitioned. So Phyllis doesn't dispute that the fact was that that's how it was meant to be originally. But other of Takata's master students had also been told that they would be successor, not just Phyllis and Barbara. So, yeah, but the problem becomes when I think we start behaving in unreiki like behaviors. One of our precepts is to be kind and not be angry. And when you have different factions of Reiki groups, like sending students to the other group's classes to heckle them, to
Oh,
heckle the teacher.
they did
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's like, yeah, it's terrible. It's like, wow, you wouldn't think this would happen in a practice that's all, it's about spiritual development, it's about physical development, it's about, being at peace. And
You don't
how
own,
is
nobody
this?
owns their practice. Like, you cannot
Yeah,
own
how
that.
is it? But that's the thing, right? People, I mean, we are human and we have egos, and sometimes our egos get the best of us. And so, yeah, there was a lot of terrible things that happened. I won't write down or discuss openly because it's so bad that it's like, I don't want to bring that kind of
And don't give
negativity
people
up.
any ideas about the heckling. Now we have like, oh, I'm gonna send some people
Yeah, it was
heckle.
crazy. I mean, the things that were sent out. In fact, that's why some of the Takata masters stopped teaching, because of
Oh,
the heckling. And I mean, it got worse than that. And so they just said, forget it. I'm not teaching, I don't want to be associated with this kind of thing, if this is what it's going to become. And it's really too bad that Mrs. Chai didn't live a little bit longer, I think, because her plans were, Barbara Weber was actually helping Mrs. Takata trademark um, that word Reiki, so to protect it, so that all sorts of variants later could pop up and kind of utilize that word for something different. But it didn't turn out that way. They were working on that. It didn't work out because they had the argument, but also because Takata transitioned um, so soon. But I kind of wonder if Takata had been around maybe another year or two, if some of the stuff would have been more or less resolved. Um, so, but you'll never know. And maybe it was, it's how it turned out.
Um,
And it
maybe it's
shows,
perfect.
it really shows how, where people were at that time with their practice. And, I mean, we all have become angry or caused trouble, in our life. And none of us get out of this life, without some kind of thing, we regret. So, we just have to chalk it up to lack of experience at the time,
They were
you know.
pretty recent master. Like when I think of them, most of them have between 1 and 3, 4 years of experience.
Yeah.
You and I know when we do the master training, we think we're there in the first year. We feel as you advance, you realize like actually you have a long way in front of you. It's like a long like so I think also her transition happened when these masters were very fresh and they believed they knew more than they did.
Yeah. They were very young masters at the time.
Yeah.
None of them really should have been training other masters, in my opinion. I mean, I feel like, back in the day, like, when Takata was learning, you basically learned how to initiate and train people into first degree. And then you waited a period and you did that. And then after that period, then you learn how to do the second degree initiation and training. And then you start teaching second degree, first and second degree. And then when you have experience doing that, then you were allowed, you were given the authority to train other masters. But, the whole idea of mastery is, that's a topic I'll be discussing in future webinars. And it's going to, mastery means something. So it means you have, a certain level, not just knowledge, but experience. You have experience, a lot of experience, and so, that's why it was people were trained like that as masters, and Takata trained her early masters the same way. Like she taught John Harvey Gray like how to do the first degree class initiations, and then she left, and she came back like 3 months later, after he had time to be teaching and practicing, and then taught him how to do the second. So it was, it was a way to pace the student too, because there's a lot of information in the third degree. So but it's more than just knowledge, you see. And that's the thing. I think people think, oh, once I learn just how to walk around and wave my hands over students or something, then I know third. And it's like, yeah, that's not really it. That's just like a small part of it. And the practice is where you start learning and teaching. You learn a lot by teaching.
Oh yeah.
So it was kind of nice because back in the day it was more of an apprenticeship. Definitely an apprenticeship. A lot of her master students in the early days, they would follow her and watch her teach tons of classes, and invite her to keep teaching where they lived, even though they could be teaching. They want to see her teach, which was great, because every first degree class you teach is different, right? So you say things a different way, or you bring up other topics or other parts of history or emphasize things. So the more time you spend with your teacher, the better. So um, later in Takata's teaching, she knew she might not get to be back with some of these students, and so she trained first degree, second degree teacher like how to do those two initiations. But as far as I can tell, she only trained a few how to initiate masters. And so, um, you know, really two, but, and that was Fran Brown, honestly, Fran Brown and Barbara Weber. And I mean, I'm not sure. It's unclear right now. Um, Sometimes we'll never know if there was the third one was really taught. Um, but, you know, the apprenticeship route was the original kind of way of doing it. And it's slow. It's a slow pace. People are obsessed with speed because they think they can get it, right?
Yeah.
You just do, like I said, you just walk around, wave your arms, whatever. There's so much more. There's so much more to it.
And I think that for me is like it's not like I'm angry or anything. It's like no, don't cut yourself short. Today I was teaching a Reiki 1 class and I was telling her like we oversell the Reiki class and we undersell it at the same time. We offer this magical thing but we don't talk about the richness of the depth of the practice. So it's very funny. We're doing both things a lot of time when we promote these Reiki classes, power, healing, that we oversell it. But then people practice for a week and that's it, or another level, and then we let them go. Versus this is a practice that never stops to surprise you and go deeper,
Right.
and to give you
Right.
blessings, right? As the precept says.
Right.
And I think, how do we change that? Is, as you said, like you can only process all these things slowly and go slowly because it's so
Right.
much depth that you will drown in it.
Yeah. I mean, every teacher has to decide, for themselves. And for myself, I've always trained masters the slow way. Like, I call it the slow way. And that's just my preference. And if somebody wants a weekend thing, fine, they can find another teacher. But like with my first degree students, I mean, that's why I had weekly Reiki shares for them, because, the class is just the class. I mean, that's the beginning. But now you got to do the practice so you can see what you were given, and see where it leads you. So by making sure we had weekly Reiki shares that students could attend, they would come back and they would practice. They would practice there. They would practice at home more likely, because once they got a group, and plus then they can interact with the other students, like, about things that come up or questions, you're there to answer the questions with the student. And, it's a supportive thing. So yeah, I mean, I did that for decades. So it was just, it was really, I think it's an opportunity that people, and if your teacher doesn't have one of those, just create your own,
Yeah.
you know?
And one thing that we're talking in the pre-interview, very interesting. So the first time I saw the $10,000 for the mastership, I was like, no way, I will never pay that, right? And I paid like 1,200 for my first master. And honestly, it was worth every penny, and I did it in 3 months. And then when we're talking, first of all, I want you to clarify what is a little bit what you like, what is offered with those 10,000, and then I'll add also my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the traditional fee was 10,000, which is like 38,000 in today's money. It's a
Yeah.
lot of money. And, people think, wow, $10,000, that's crazy. Why would anybody pay that? Well, the Takata Master students did, and Takata had to pay a fortune. And that's just, it was part of the tradition, and part of it was going way back to the Sui's time. Even the school, the Gakkai, the Usui Kai now, they had high fees. And in fact, in some of the like 1920s newspaper, there was that article saying, man, this Usui school, has such high fees, like, what's that about? So people are always complaining about the fees. But the point of the fee, I mean, there's a lot of great lessons when
Yeah.
people contemplate the fees, but $10,000, at first you think it's a lot of money, but when you start really thinking about it, what are we supposed to, what are we getting in the training? And it's not just, like I said, waving your hands around. It's a mind shift too. It's a different way of looking at things. Rather than looking at $10,000, it's like, whoa, this is a lot of money. You can look at it differently, like uh, a challenge. Instead of just saying, I can't do that, or I don't want to do that, you can be like, how can I do that? You just shift your mind. How can I do it? And it really makes you think, do I want to do it? That's one of the lessons. Like, when you say $10,000, just see who just immediately shuts down and just doesn't even try to come up with any possible way. If they really want something, they'll do it. That's pretty much what I found. I mean, people back then, like Rick Bachner and a bunch of these master students that did this training, they didn't have lots of money. They didn't have, like, there was like a lot of money to them too, and they didn't have it, but they decided, you know what, I'm going to work for it. I'm going to make sure every dime I can scrounge, I'm going to save it so I can give that to Mrs. Takata. And then Takata also had a way that students could pay, which was like put down, like Bethel Fay, she was going to borrow money from a friend, but it turned out that friend at the last minute said, oh, I don't have it. oops, so Beth only had half, she had 5,000, and she asked Mr. Takata, hey, instead of just saying, I don't have the money, right? She could have just said to Takata, I don't have the money, my friend backed up. She didn't say that. She said, I have half of it, and I'll teach Reiki classes, and I'll send you all the money that I was earning from the Reiki classes until I pay 10,000. And that was not the only time something like that was done. Or people set up classes for Mrs. Takata to teach, and the student's tuition would be deducted off the $10,000. So there were ways that Takata had that would empower students who really wanted it. I mean, setting up a class, these students would be setting up classes of like 30 people sometimes. That's a lot of effort. If you've ever tried to set up classes before to get like 30 students, and then that's just for first degree. So it's like there were ways, but the 10,000 also really isn't that much if you think about what we're trying to teach people with just mastery, which is mastery, not just Reiki mastery, but mastery in your life, where you set your mind to something, and people call it manifestation, but you set your mind to something, and then the universe really does conspire to help you along. But start thinking about 10,000. It's like, well, back then, and second degree was 500.
More than
So are
now.
you telling me
Yeah.
$500? So like, are you telling me like in the entire career, if you're going to teaching Reiki, you're not going to teach 20 students? That's only 20 students. So no longer is it $10,000. It's 20 second degree students. And before they get to second degree, they had to go to first degree, which is at the end of Takata's life, $150. So really, I mean, it's not a lot of students. It's not, it's not a lot. So the whole number 10,000, it means like all things. I mean, there's like a lot of symbolism, but
Yeah.
it's supposed to be a lot. It's supposed to be a lot because of many reasons. But like I said, one is just an immediate challenge to the student. Where are they with their relationship to money? Are they in the poverty mindset, or are they in the abundance mindset? And so the abundance mindset, people, like I said, will say, how can I do this? How can I do it? Not, I can't do that. Without even trying to put in one little effort, within a split second, they decide they can't do it. Yeah, I don't want students like that. I want students who are determined, And then Takata did too. Takata did too, you know.
I think there are a couple of things I find very interesting. First of all, I'm gonna just clarify for the people who have done master training a day that 10,000 includes like, mentoring, like almost like a year or 2 years of training. So,
Right.
so understand that. But I think also, for example, in my dojo, there is a filter. everybody could join. My dojo is for martial arts is very cheap. So they put a big signing fee up of like $300, which for martial arts. And the idea of the fee is to actually weed the people out that don't really want to do it, because most of the training and the time of the sensei is the first 2-3 months where they have to teach everything. And then if they have to do that with all the people who drop after a month, it's not worth it. So
Mhm.
the big signing up fee is almost like a filter, like, do you really want to commit to do
Yeah,
Iaido? And
right.
I think and I'm the one who actually went the other way, right? I paid like 1,200 for my first master training. And then, as I mentioned to you, I repeated so many that I probably am closer to 15,000 than that,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And then every penny's been worth, like,
Right.
everything. But, it's a filter, but also as I'm hearing you, is like one of the challenges as masters. First of all, we think we're ready, then we do the class, $1,000, we waste it because we didn't feel that we were not ready. We just were told like, oh, more power, we go. But the second thing, the way you're putting it, if I have to look for students, I also develop the capacity to get students so I can pay you, which
Right.
is the biggest challenge. We get a Reiki master and they're like, no way, I'm like, I don't know how to get students. So you do the part that is the biggest challenge. I realize, actually, I don't want to have a Reiki business.
Right.
I don't want to be a Reiki teacher before you spend the money.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's quite, I never seen it like that. And I really appreciate changing my
Yeah.
perspective on it.
Yeah. And I mean, I taught also like Takata taught, like where if students, like my current students, would be set up a class, I would deduct that amount off that $10,000 fee. And
Yeah.
see, you're teaching the student, you're teaching that second degree student how to, set up a class.
Yeah.
They might not understand it at the time, but see, that's already part of the training. And there's a lot of stuff we do that, in first degree that we're training them for second degree. And they don't know it. They just don't know it, but it's a stepping, it's like these progressions. Like in first degree, we put our hands down and we're just aware. We're just simply resting our awareness on our hands. And for so many people, that's so challenging because they think they got to do something. I got to do something, And it's like what we're doing is we're training them in meditation. We're training them in mindfulness
Yeah.
because when we move on to second degree, you're going to need it because once we start doing like the mental treatment, when we do a mental treatment in second degree, anything you're thinking, there's a certain way to do mental treatments. There's like several methods, but there's one in particular Takata stopped teaching eventually, um, because probably because maybe it was too challenging for students. But anything you're thinking goes directly into that person's subconscious mind. So you have to already have the skill of being in that present moment, retaining your mindfulness of being there. So you're not thinking about other stuff because whatever you're thinking, it's going to go in there. And this is one of the big lessons, in that Takata taught, that Reiki is Reiki. Reiki is neutral. People think, oh, Reiki can do no harm on stuff. Well, the practices that we teach our students does no harm. But when we move into second degree, this is an advanced degree. We have to then allow for the student to progress like to this mindfulness to teach them this particular technique. But the other thing is going back to what Takata said, that Reiki is neutral. It's not good or bad. Energy is just energy. It's like sunshine. It's not good or bad. It feels good, but if you get too much, you get burned,
Yeah.
right? Water, it's good for you. If you drink too much, you can actually die. So that's what Reiki is. And so she wouldn't allow, I mean, there's all sorts of stories, but she wouldn't allow, certain ages into her classes, usually it's around age 10 and up, because before that, their energetic system, children's energetic system, isn't well developed enough to handle the initiation process. Yeah, it can create damage. These are her words. So I'm saying there are some big misunderstandings with the Reiki system of how it was later kind of passed on, where Takata's like, hey, the way we practice, as long as you follow this method, everything's fine. But Usui, he knew how to use Reiki like we learn it mostly today, and he knew how to use it more offensively, energetically attack. So because it's just energy and you can use it for good or other purposes, but we teach it. So that's why we say it's Usui Shiki Reiki Ryoho. This is the system that Usui wanted to pass down. And some of the other techniques were passed down, but we only pass them down to maintain the knowledge, not to, abuse anything. So, but yeah, it's a big thing. But like I said, going back, we're training students, like second degree students who want to do teacher training. It's a long process. It's a couple years usually. Students have always followed me around, watched me teach classes, help me teach during the classes. I tell them what part they're going to teach. So they're getting all this experience during their training. And, it takes so long. Um, it really wouldn't, you know, be worth, if you break it all down, like per day, it's actually, they're not paying that much, to
They're
be in
not.
constant contact. And they helping me out in clinic, when I'm treating
Yeah.
general public with Reiki treatments. A lot of times I would team treat with my students to let them have more experience.
And I think also Reiki tree has become commoditized, like versus understanding this is a
Right.
commitment of going deeper into your practice for life. This is not even like a teaching level. It's really it's called mystery teachings, right? In
Yeah.
Japanese, it's like it's a commitment to something deeper. So I think also again that filter sometimes I'm like, you have no idea. I go everywhere and there are like Reiki masters everywhere, right?
Right.
And when I took my class, Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, in the same weekend, they told me you can do Reiki master next weekend.
Right. And those kind of masters that come out, I mean, and that's where I decided to stop calling. I struggled for years with this, this idea, because mastery means something to me. And so, and I've told people, and even in my book, I write, I can't make you a Reiki master. What I can do, I can basically make you a Reiki teacher. And that's the difference. Like, and I think, I really had this shift a little while ago. I'm like, I think I'm gonna really stress that a lot, that we train Reiki teachers, and it's totally up to you. It's up to the student to become a master. I mean, that's, no matter how many times I've said it before, I think it's better maybe to, even on the certificate, have Reiki teacher, because when you first learn how to teach first degree, right, you've not mastered that. By you're just now starting, so it takes years to become a master, and a lot of experience. So I feel like, for myself, and I mean, if other people feel called too, I hope that's like a trend that will be, first degree, second degree, and we call it third degree, but the third degree can be broken down like first degree teacher, second degree teacher, third degree teacher. But mastery is something else,
Yeah. I don't use any master my certificate. I'm like, you completed Shimpiden training. I'm not even saying like that's it. You did a Shimpiden
Right.
training, which is level 3, and that's as much as I'm giving you as a certificate, right?
Right.
And I really appreciate that. And also I think a lot of Shimpiden trainings or Reiki master, whatever you want to call it, they teach you the toolment, but they don't teach you how to teach. And I think also that's the difference when you're doing, especially in your lineage, like they're training with you, they've been for 2 years. I learned teaching because I did a bunch of dry runs for free with friends.
Right.
And actually I realized everything that I did wrong, right? And I did that until I feel, okay, now I can teach. And now I'm realizing intuitively I did that. I did Reiki 1 for years, then I added Reiki 2, and I started Reiki 3 like way after, right? Like way after.
Right.
And my first, right, like my first one was like, this is the first time I teach, so like be aware of it, right? So I think we also have to be honest of where we are
Right.
and communicating. And in your case, you have almost 30 years of experience, right? So like there obviously it's going to be a different experience to train with you, and there is no better or worse, it's just more or less experience. Like it's not, if you did that Reiki training that I did, Reiki 1, Reiki 2, I ended up in a different place, so it was a great way for me to get in.
Right.
We're not also diminishing. You may do your Reiki master and everything a month, then take your time to practice, and maybe you're going to go deeper, right? I think what we're saying is whatever way you were trained, just practice.
Yeah, just practice. And that's the thing. And that's the thing. I mean, like, some people, they come to Reiki, they get a lot of training right off the bat. Maybe they went 1, 2, 3 in a weekend, and but some of those students will know, like, they'll practice and they'll realize, something, they you can intuit that something's missing, or something, there's more, or I don't know, just something doesn't sit right. So those are the students that will, one, keep practicing, but two, go looking. See, they'll start looking actively, not just take the class because the person who they took class from lived in the same city or whatever. I mean, these students are the serious ones, and they'll start traveling to make sure, or they'll bring the teacher to them. They will put forth that dedication to find the right teacher for them. And that's a whole ordeal too. You got to find the right teacher or teachers, for yourself, because everybody, everybody has different experiences. Everybody teaches a little bit different, but got to find what works for you, what resonates with you, because it's your path. It's your path.
I love how empowering that sounded. So I have another question, because we have this wonderful conversation. And when I look at you, I'm like, okay, you have traveled all around the States and Japan and everywhere. You've been with archives. You have so much wisdom and so many years of practice. I will never be able to live up. I just took a Reiki 1 class and I'm listening to this. So obviously, one thing I was teaching today in my Reiki 1 is like, you're going to make mistakes if you practice, because that's part of it, right? So I love to close every interview with that little oops that brought you perhaps actually a big insight, because that's the way we get insights, right? If not, we
Oh,
don't
right.
learn. So if you could share one, I would really appreciate it.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I was thinking of some other stuff when you were talking. Let me address that. When you're teaching students, and
Yeah.
these are brand new students, first year class, never maybe even got a Reiki treatment before, and they hear the teacher talking about all this stuff, and you're right, sometimes they just shut down. They're just like, well, that's never going to be me. I mean, again, there's got to be a mind shift if they do want to practice. It has nothing to do with comparisons. I mean, and that's the one thing we give up, is comparing ourselves,
Yeah.
because it doesn't help. I mean, because we're different people, and we're on our own path. So, and eventually you come to a place, and that's another reason why I have those Reiki shares, because students can come and listen to stories, and eventually, if they keep coming, they'll get to a place, because in the beginning they're like, oh, this student here feels the energy, and I had all these experiences and I don't have anything, and but eventually they'll get to a place, mentally, where they can share and not compare, and they can hear stories from other people and not feel insecure. They just hear it, and they can learn lessons from it. And instead of all of a sudden this defensive emotion runs up, or this um, what do you call it? The lack of confidence, insecurity, that pops up. But eventually you can share without comparing. So, but as far as like an oops mistake, that's a good one. I have to think
Go
about it,
on.
because I mean, I have to think about it, because I'm sure I made some mistake. I can tell you, in the acupuncture clinic, I overdid something, and decided, oops, I'll never do that again. Um, and I'll tell that story, because it's
Perfect.
because that's the one that's coming to my mind. But in Chinese medicine, we feel the pulse. We feel it with 3 fingers. We feel the pulse, and not just beats per minute. There's all sorts of strength, and the width of the pulse, and how erratic or normal it is. I mean, there's all sorts of things with pulse taking. But anyway, there's this particular type of pulse called a slippery pulse. And a slippery pulse means it's like you got your fingers down. It feels like somebody's pulling a bead of pearls, a string of pearls under. So it's rolling. It's like this slippery pulse. We feel it going like somebody's literally pulling a pearl necklace under your fingers. This usually means 2 things. It means that there's like dampness or phlegm in the body, but also pregnancy. So I treat a lot of women and for infertility. And so I felt this woman's pulse, and she was pregnant, and she had the slippery pulse. And she didn't, of course, know anything. I just felt her pulse, and I'm like, "Oh, you have a slippery pulse." She's like, "What does that mean?" I'm like, "It means you're pregnant." So she was like, "Okay, well, I'll never do that again." Because what happened was, like a week or 2 later, I'm not sure, she called me up all frantic that she was bleeding, vaginally. And so she was all concerned that she was going to miscarry. And so she wanted me to come to her house and, do a treatment and feel her pulse. And I thought, oh, crap. So I went there and I felt her pulse. It was not slippery.
Oh,
What do I say to her? So I try to like be like, well, this isn't definitive. I try to like, I knew the
she loves
pulse
it.
isn't slippery anymore.
Yeah.
But I realized at that point, never again will I overshare, why I'm feeling that pulse, for instance, because I don't want to ever be put in that position, because, and she did miscarry. And, but I can't even legally tell her, oh, you're gonna miscarry, like, so I put myself in a very bad bind by oversharing some information. And so I know how I teach Reiki, and I think I can't give you specifics, but I tell students in the class, like in first degree, I will give you first degree stories. And in second degree, I will give you second degree stories. And what I mean by that is in first degree, I'll try to keep all the stories, pretty simple and basic and nothing like too, fantastic. Um, because sometimes, like I said, the student's mind isn't open for it yet. They hear those stories and they'll be like, I can never do that, or whatever, right? Or, this person's just special or something. It's like, no. So, I don't think so. Talk to my wife. So, you have to be, when we share stories in first degree, I basically tell first degree stories. And at second degree, they'll believe almost anything you tell them because they've already have all this practice and experience to them that they're like, whoa, like this, like all sorts of stuff has happened if they practice long enough. And they're like, wow, so they're open now to hear stories and, actually have the stories land somewhere in them. So, and same with third degree. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the gist of like, I would say what I learned.
I actually appreciate those because when you start talking, it's also sometimes we overshare what we felt in a session to the
Yeah,
person. And honestly, being a little bit more silent may be better. Sometimes we
yeah,
need people to process their own emotion, their own feeling. So I know it was acupuncture, but I think actually it was a very, very beautiful learning for Reiki as well. So that's why it popped out in your head because we don't talk very much about how we share stories as teacher or messages or, I personally have a policy like the least I won't share very much
right,
unless because they're doing their own healing, right? And I
right,
may be sharing something that I'm not meant to.
right. That's
Uh,
exactly right. Yes, that's
and
that's
then,
me too. You're
yeah,
right.
so
That's how I am. People will come to Reiki treatment and, sometimes they'll want to hear, well, what did you feel? And even if I got messages and stuff, unless I get them 3 times and it just keeps bugging me,
do
I
the
won't tell.
same. I did
Yeah,
it three
yeah.
times, and
I won't tell them
really,
because, I'll just say, oh, this area took
yeah,
more energy. And they'll be like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, that area needs more energy there.
yeah,
I keep it very, because I'm not there, to do that. I'm not
yeah,
there to give them a psychic reading. I'm there to simply do the Reiki treatment.
and that's it.
And plus you could freak people out. In fact, that's another Reiki story where I was I was teaching a class and I was like just running my hand over somebody's leg. And I got all this pain in my bone. And so when I feel the Reiki, we can tell sometimes where the injury was. Like if it's in our skin, it's pretty surface. If it's a muscular injury, we'll feel our muscles. If it's a bone like problem, like it was broken, we'll feel an ache in our bones. And it's not us taking on that person's bad injury. It's like just the way we're receiving it so we can understand how Reiki's communicating. So I had my hand over the leg of this woman and I was like, son of a, it hurt, my bones hurt. And I said, did you break this leg at some point? And it freaked her out because she had broken that area, but it was like 10 years ago. And I'm like, oh, I said, well, it's obviously healed because she's not limping or anything. I didn't know anything about it. I said, but physically it healed, but on an energetic level, some didn't heal all the way. Otherwise, I wouldn't pick it up. But that kind of spooked her that, people can, I don't know, either be that sensitive or know things that are so unapparent. But anybody can do that, it just comes with practice and
Yeah,
experience. That's it. But you can't freak people out. So we tend to keep our mouth shut. I keep my mouth shut now during
I
treatment.
I do, and it's funny because I'm like, unless it comes three times and it really knocks on my head,
Yeah, exactly.
and then I try to do it very positively,
Yeah,
very I mostly keep like, oh, we work a lot of like, we release tension here, we allow things to move. I'm very
yeah,
general. And I ask them, how did I feel? So, and I think actually that is very wise advice, because sometimes we do get something that we have to say.
Right. It's true.
It happens, but I never thought about like being careful about freaking people out in classes, and I think that's also a good watch out. I'll keep it in mind as well. Some people are like, because in our classes we get some people who are very into like, I want to see angels flying, miracles, to believe in Reiki, and then we got the skeptic who are like, we have a mix of people. Like, it's not like we have one. Well, I teach a lot of one-on-one, so I do, because I like that experience of adapting teachings. But sometimes you have, I remember I taught a class with 5 people. They were like the 5 most opposite people that you could have. So keep it safe, right? And keep it
Yeah. Keep it, like I said, first degree stories and first degree and,
broken leg.
yeah, just like, okay, this takes a lot of energy here. And if she reveals, oh, I broke that, then fine. But don't be like, hey, did you break this? Because that, yeah, that doesn't go over so well sometimes.
So last thing, you're gonna develop a poker face when you're demonstrating, because sometimes you're demonstrating on people, and yeah, you may have that very strong hibiki sensation in your hands. And you have to keep on going, because if not, they're going to be scared to place their hands, because it may be painful, right? And it's just,
Right.
what pain means is place your hands longer. It doesn't mean
That's right. Yeah, keep your hands there longer.
That's it.
Right.
Like,
Until the sensation stops. Yeah.
some people don't like to throw in me because, like, what does that mean? Place your hands longer. Well, how do I deepen my practice? Sit on your butt, practice. Like, it sounds like I'm basic, but which is why we're having so much fun.
Yeah, that's right. That's
So,
funny.
I have a drawing for you, and it's weird because it's a little bit different. So I think I was also influenced by meeting you, and also by your book. I think there is this Japanese deity called Fudomyo, and obviously I'm very familiar with it. I don't know if you're familiar with Fudomyo. He's the deity of the samurai. He has a sword, and he's very scary looking, and he's blue. But he's actually scaring people into alignment, and the sword is to cut through illusion so you can see the true self.
Yeah.
So I did the bodies I usually did, but if you see the face, it has a little bit of Fudomyo.
Yeah.
Which is why, and then I'm laughing because your background is blue, and I don't remember that because last time we talked.
Right.
And blue is actually for compassion. So I was like, oh, I'm never drawn to blue, but I'm going to put his blue face. For them, is blue. And he has a knot because he's a servant of humanity. He's here on Earth. He's the emanation of the cosmic Buddha on Earth. And then the sword is a demon cutting sword that is to cut through anger and worry so you can see your true essence and go to alignment. He has a lasso, but I put a pen in yours because your book is bringing like a lot of, and the archival part and bringing that truth about things. And then this is obviously the non-duality, silver and gold in Japanese tradition. That very stable mountain pose, because you're very grounded, very so needed. And this is also a little bit of that earth energy, but also knowing that by being very grounded, I can actually reach enlightenment. Like, it's not just heavenly energies, heaven and earth coming together.
Right.
Body and mind. And so it's a little bit different, but yeah, I had fun. It's also a little bit more masculine than I usually draw. All my drawings are very feminine, so it's a little
That's
bit of,
wonderful. It's wonderful. Yes.
so a lot of fun. And I'll be sending that to you like in a week or two. With Thanksgiving, I don't know, like I'm gonna have to rush to send it before the package of the Black Friday.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But so I really, beyond this interview, which I'm beyond grateful, that book I really highly recommend it. I'm gonna put a link on the podcast, because I think a lot of time I come from, like, again, your what they call a traditional Japanese lineage. With all these are misnomers, to be honest, because my practice is a little closer to yours, who's like Takata practice. We're actually very close. And I think a lot of time I saw Takata Reiki as like something different because of my training that was supposed to be Takata. So I really encourage everyone. Your book has a lot of richness. The way she describes Usui stories is very beautiful, especially the part about also like the part when Usui goes, which supposedly is invented, when he goes to the poor camp, the people, the beggars camp.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of beautiful teachings for everyone. And all the work that you put into it, I wanted you to know that I know you invested a lot of time, money, was part of your goal to do that. I just want you to know we're so thankful. It was really, I really enjoyed that book. It really was like, wow, and I've read a lot of Reiki books, as you can imagine, because I read like a ton of books.
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So we're really grateful for you and for you coming here. And I'll be posting your link for your website. Again, I love acupuncture, so people in Kentucky, they can get two. They can get whatever they want as well. You're supposed to make people laugh. I actually love the feeling of the needles coming into my skin. It's a very strange thing. I love it.
Yeah, and it's very relaxing.
It's lovely. It's just like you feel your body, like it brings me to my body, which is not my strength. Anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to add before we?
No, just encourage. I'm just going to encourage people like I always do to practice. Just practice, practice, practice.
Perfect. That is the perfect final words. I'm not gonna add beyond thank you. And
Thank
everyone,
you.
just read the notes for more information about your wonderful practice and both. Thank you.